Graduated, elevated, now it's my time to shine, yeah, let's go. Graduated, elevated, now it's my time to shine, yeah, let's go. Major moves, power moves.
Welcome to Ph.D. Hard Talk. I am your host, Noma Mguni. Thank you so much, Dr. Hilary Musarurwa. Could you please introduce yourself and your work in terms of your research, and then we can take it from there.
Well, thank you very much, Noma, for hosting me. I think to simplify things, just call me Hilary. Otherwise, you'll be tongue-tied for the duration of the interview. Yeah, so my name is Hilary Musarurwa. I'm an African scholar and academic. My areas of research and focus for my studies were on financial inclusion and improving the financial well-being of university students in Scotland, where I did a research there with students from one university there. And I've also done research on peace building and looking at enhancing youth participation in governance and elections in Zimbabwe. So I hold 2 PhDs. The first one was in peace studies with the Durban University of Technology in South Africa, and the second one was a PhD in management with Herod University in Edinburgh, Scotland.
Excellent. I mean, I've got a lot of questions because I'm dying with just one. So you've done two, like you're in a different league already. So in terms of your choices, then we'll start there. You've got two. We'll start with the first one, which is the one looking at Zimbabwe and like peace building. We'll just touch on it. Could you take us through in terms of what inspired you to go down this route and why this research topic?
All right. Yeah. So that PhD was pretty much exploring social entrepreneurship as a peace building tool to address structural violence in Zimbabwe. I went that route because as a social entrepreneur and social scientist, I wanted to see how we could bring in social entrepreneurship into peace building, and basically use that as a rallying point to mobilize young people to participate in issues that help address structural violence. And structural violence in this case being a systemic condition where one's potential is restricted or limited by different settings or different issues, such as limited access to basic services, limited access to the enjoyment of human rights. So in this case, I was looking at the hindrances of youth participating in local government activities as well as elections, premised on the fact that because of poverty and other socioeconomic challenges, young people do not actively participate in any of these activities because they are pretty much chasing after the elusive dollar. So the reasoning behind that was, what will happen if we mobilize a group of young people to start a social enterprise that does two things. First and foremost, it identifies the challenges that young people face in the community and ideates around solutions in addressing those. So I think some of the challenges that were identified were issues to do with clean water, access to clean water, a clean environment. So issues to do with sanitation and just cleaning up your environment. Issues to do with just being able to come together as young people. I think the other challenge that was identified was the lack of infrastructure for youth to come together. So the lack of social amenities or recreational facilities. So the thinking then was, if we bring young people together and they start to explore ways of addressing this, we have a point of presence in the community. So what we then did was we did what we call the Norton Youth Endeavor, where this group of action researchers, because they were then part of the action research team, went around a number of wards in this constituency, having meetings with young people as a precursor to the bigger Northern Youth India, where we brought in the local member of parliament and other community leaders to hear the concerns and the issues that had been raised by young people through their community or their ward-based mobilization. So I think the thinking then was if they start actively making money through that social enterprise. So in this case, they were working on producing sanitary pads, and then they would use those to generate an income. At least then there was no excuse to say we don't have money, we need to be looking for money so we cannot participate in local processes. I think there were also ideas on other local income generating projects which did not take off. I think maybe I can unpack this later on in the conversation.
Okay. Thank you very much for the in-depth response. So I guess, you've touched on the youth and their participation in the community, and you've mentioned that you did speak to local government to come in and listen to the issues that they had. So my question then is, you've done that research. How did it actually benefit the community in regards to the youth and also the elder generation that's actually there? Has it benefit anybody, or has it just gone by the wayside, or have the policymakers actually taken it on to say we need to improve?
Well, I think the premise was that it was going to be successful. And I think this is the beauty of research. If you succeed, you document why it succeeded. If you fail, you also document why it failed. So it was mixed results. I think during that period, it did succeed. It succeeded in the sense that at least young people were mobilized. So there was a hunger and a desire for young people to come together. And also there was an opportunity for intergenerational conversations between the elderly and the young. And I think the time we did that study, it was towards the election, so there was also active mobilization. The challenge came in when you now had people who wanted to score politically or who were looking for political expediency through this process. So there was then a lot of interference from political offices. We had a situation where politicians wanted to take advantage of the young people. So at the end of the day, they also now tried to influence the process, to influence how this whole action group or organization could be structured. Then there was also a challenge, I think, with young people themselves, wherein there was a lot of jostling for power and positions before anything had actually taken off. I think this is also one of the major challenges we have in communities that are marginalized, or in communities where there are high levels of unemployment, where any opportunity of people coming together is seen as there's a lot of money somewhere. So I think there were people who were seeing dollars flying left, right, and center before even any money had been put together, and that unfortunately led to the demise of the Northern Youth India. I don't think the mobilized group went beyond 6 months. I think it lasted about 3 or 4 meetings after our major combined youth endeavor, where we brought in all the leaders. And like I pointed out, there was a lot of politicking also happening. So the young people themselves could not agree on how to go forward. Some were being enticed or influenced by politicians. I won't name names or indicate from which side they came from, but we had such issues where instead of allowing the young people to self-organize and get this process to form out naturally, we had people who tried to to dictate the course of where this would take. So coming in as a researcher, I had to take a neutral position. I could have simply stamped my foot to say, look, this is how we want things to go. But that would have also created some form of bias in terms of the findings. But I then said, look, if this is going to die, then let it die a natural death, but at least let us learn from the challenges that have emerged. So that initiative did not go very far. It was promising, and I think that's also a lesson for community mobilization, where people want to take advantage of the social capital that's in the community. The clear message there is politicians should stay away and allow community members to lead the process on their own, because at the end of the day, community members belong to different political parties. But if they can find a common voice, they should be allowed to proceed and work together in unison, rather than politicians coming in and trying to set camps or trying to use such rally points as also points to campaign for their own tenure in office.
I'm hearing a lot of problems from what you're saying in regards to, I mean, I would say Zimbabwe as an individual, in the sense of you've gone in, you're going through your scientific research, and politicians are now jumping in, and also, so I wouldn't blame the youth, because I think it's lack of education. And if you're really starving, you know, like you said, you see dollar signs or pounds or euros or, you know, whatever you see. And in terms of, you know, education, then, do you think there is need to educate the previous generation on how to be logical thinkers, not to think of me, but think of the third generation below, based on what you've seen? I mean, you've summarized a lot of challenges here. So I'm just asking for your opinion. So this is your opinion. I'm sure it's not in your research. Do you think they need to educate? Because I've spoken to somebody who's looking at squatter camps actually in Harare. And my question was, why build a community of squatter camps within a city? There's no sewers, there's no ABCD. And he said they need somewhere because they've come from rural areas and they're in poverty, and they've got a vision in regards to where they should be. So that's why they're there. So I'm thinking about that in the background, and I'm thinking of this youth as well, because he was, you know, saying that there were a lot of youth as well who thought maybe there were greener pastures in the city. So I guess just to understand your opinion based on influence from politicians, and also, you know, reviewing how the youth actually did behave at the time when you were there.
Well, it's not only an opinion, but I think it's a fact that's also documented in my research. So it's there in my thesis. The need for civic education, the need for education is clearly documented, not only to the young people themselves, but also to the older generation. I think the need to have communities understand what is their civic duty and how they can exercise it. So that understanding of their civic right to participate in any process, and their civic right to self-organize without any interference, and also how they can then address, because I think one of the structural violent issues that I raised were that issue of political interference is a form of structural violence. The issue of the police or the state security hovering and trying to be involved in local activities is a form of structural violence. The issue of closely monitoring and trying to hinder any progressive meetings that happen in the community is a form of structural violence. But I think there's need to then educate communities and people to say, okay, how do you then work around this? What is your constitutional right? What does the constitution say about you participating and being able to meet within your community. How do you engage with politicians in ways that bring results? So there's a lot of education that needs to happen, even with the older generation. I think you raised the point of passing on the baton. How do you do that without just thinking about yourself and your political life or your political career? How do you think about impacting the community that you are in a way that not only benefits you as an individual, but benefits everyone? So I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done. It's unfortunate that in Zimbabwe, most of the civic education is restricted to voter education, and that is only done and controlled by the Zimbabwe Election Commission. We need to also have a curriculum review where right at the lower levels of education, you start having civic education being given to people maybe from primary school level, such that by the time they get to an age where they can meet and they can start organizing, they know why they're doing it, and they know how they can achieve positive changes in their community. And it's quite unfortunate that our politicians are at the forefront of polarizing the communities. So people become so polarized, they identify each other depending on the political hats that we put on, and fail to see beyond that. Yet we all have got common challenges and common issues that need to be addressed by everyone, regardless of where they come from, regardless of where they which political camp they are part of.
That is quite interesting, and I think I do have a lot of questions, but I'm conscious of time. So I'll move us on to your second piece of research. And I guess the question that I will ask, which is a simple question, how did you identify your research gap with the one that you've done in Scotland in terms of your research?
Well, with the one in Scotland, when the call came about, they were looking for someone who was going to research on how credit unions can be used as platforms or as tools to improve financial behavior. So I think it was whilst I was doing the preliminary literature review that I looked at a gap that existed in terms of improving the financial behavior of university students, because university students do struggle with financial well-being issues. And it was also looking at how the overall university experience and maybe also pressures on mental health are impacted on by financial issues and financial challenges. How well are students managing their finances? And the gap that existed there was that, yes, we have, like in this case, we had a credit union that was based at a university, which was missing the opportunity to support a critical user or a critical actor within that university service ecosystem, which was the student. Because this credit union, yes, was targeted for faculty and staff members, but there was also an opportunity and a gap to say, look, how can we serve the very students within which the university exists to serve, and be able to provide service that even goes beyond providing academic support to students. So there was a gap to say there's need to look at financial capability support for university students, and a credit union could be such a key platform wherein it comes in with resources that provide training on financial literacy, which is what we ended up doing. And we ended up doing capacity building of a group of senior university students who became what we called money mentors. And these students were able to use their lived experience during the first two or so years of navigating financial management within university, and then share that experience to coach first-year students. So the gap existed in the literature because it was also an issue of there was a scarcity in terms of research on financial capability support for UK students. The gap also existed in terms of service provision. So I was looking at how we can provide transformative service research, which is aimed at towards improving students' financial well-being.
Thank you very much. That was in depth. And I tend to get this question in regards to a literature review. I mean, how long is a string, basically, is the question. You've read your literature and you've identified the gap and you've said, okay, that is the gap. I guess the question is, how much reading did you do during your 3 or 4 years, to ensure that the literature, because obviously new things come up, as you know, every year. People are writing, we're all, typing away in our little rooms. So essentially what I'm trying to ask is, how did you know that this is enough and this will get me through my Viva?
That's a tricky question because you never know that this is enough. You see, once you go down that rabbit hole, you just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. So you need to get to a point where you say, look, okay, I'm stopping here. Because as you read more papers, as you review more literature, you keep discovering more things. So you need to get to a point where you say, okay, I think in terms of what I want to focus on, or what this thesis is focusing on. Remember, you're doing a PhD, so it's not like you want to get a Nobel Peace Prize or anything like that. So you just need to focus on what you can do within the PhD. It's 3 years, and if you keep on digging into literature, it's going to take longer. So you need to stop and have an indication to say, okay, these are the key areas I'm focusing on, and this is where I need to look at. The challenge that I also faced was, you see, when you start in year one, you review literature which is closer to year one. By the time you get to submission, which might be in year 3 or year 4, if you put in the writing period, the literature you used in year one is more or less obsolete. So I had that challenge with my supervisor saying, look, you need to change. You're citing things from 2017 in a thesis you're submitting in 2021. Then I was like, but hold on. This is the literature that I reviewed when I started. So am I going back to rewrite the whole thesis? So you need to also strike a balance. Yes, as you work on the final version of your thesis, you need maybe to look for current literature. And if you intend to publish out of your PhD, by the time you get to publish, which might be a year or 2 after you've done with your Viva, you also need to revisit the literature. So the literature review issue is a tricky one. I think it all boils down to the individual as to where you then need to put a limit. If you don't, you definitely might spend years upon years reviewing literature and not really writing.
So in your opinion then, because, we've both agreed to say it is problematic. In your opinion, do you think it's more of confidence in writing that helps with, the line to say, actually, this is enough for now. I may need to maybe review each year and keep adding something that's relevant to my work, not irrelevant, not interesting. What's your opinion there? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think you need to get to a point where you say, yeah, this should be enough for what I'm writing. So also the quality of your writing and your argument, how you put across your argument, and then how this literature supports that. Because at the end of the day, whatever literature review you're doing is aimed at helping you identify the key concept and the key theories. It's aimed at helping you identify the research gap. It's also aimed at helping you see how your own study or your own research contributes to the knowledge gaps that you have identified. What is it that you're now saying, which might be in line with what other research has found, or which might be different. So it's your ability not only to write, but to then analyze and synthesize all this information to say, I think this is enough to support my argument. This is enough to then put forward the thesis that I am proposing here and the findings that I am proposing. But another key factor is a good supervisory team. If you don't have a good supervisor or a good supervisory team, they might not also help you in identifying the key literature, or in telling you as to whether this is good enough or not. You might end up going to a viva with a literature review. I also want to point out that I think literature review happens across all the phases of your study. It happens at the beginning when you're trying to formulate your research questions and your objectives. It happens during the data collection as you're applying your methodologies. It happens at data analysis. It happens when you're making your conclusions. So at all these phases, you are somewhere reviewing literature, and you need to be able to identify literature that is current and literature that is relevant to your topic of discussion.
Thank you very much. I'm going to touch